Imagine working 20 years at a prestigious job, yet being denied permission to attend your own mother's funeral. Park Chulmin earned a diplomat salary in one of North Korea's most elite positions, but that privilege meant nothing when the state said no. While he lived in Moscow watching Russians freely buy groceries, travel, and speak their minds, his family back in Pyongyang survived on rations that had been cut off years ago. This is what happens when an entire economy runs on loyalty instead of currency, where your worth isn't measured in dollars, but in how closely you follow orders. A foreign ministry official for 2 decades finally did the math. His diplomatic passport wasn't a privilege, it was a leash. And the cost of cutting it? Everything. Subscribe to understand the reality behind the world's most isolated economy. Your view helps shed light on the truth. This story isn't easy for me to tell, but I think it's time. You know, the Korean peninsula has been divided for over 70 years now. I lived on the other side of that wall, and I thought I had it pretty good. My name is Park Chulmin. I lived in Pyongyang's Changwon street, an apartment complex where foreign ministry officials gathered. This wasn't the dark, bleak North Korea you might imagine. It was different there. We had 10-story buildings with elevators. Foreign currency shops sold Russian chocolate. While ordinary people scraped by on corn porridge, I ate white rice and meat. I didn't know then that I should have been ashamed. It was spring 2021. My wife, Soon-hee, was making kimchi when my mother called from Pyongyang. She asked about my brothers, about the grandchildren's health. I held the phone and said, "Mother, we're doing well. Don't worry." The words came so easily. Back then, I really believed them. But that spring, something strange happened. My colleague, Choi Seok, stopped showing up to work. A few days later, word came that he'd been called in for ideological review. Ideological review, imagine getting hauled into a police station and told your thoughts are suspicious. Terrifying, right? No one knew what Choi Seok had done wrong. He just vanished. I tried to forget about it quickly. In our system, you don't dwell on these things. Invisible hands are always watching from somewhere, like neighbors peering into your home. I'm fine. I'm a loyal worker. That's how I reassured myself. That night, Soon-hee's fresh kimchi appeared at dinner. She'd made it exactly the way my mother taught her, coating cabbage with glutinous rice paste, adding red pepper powder. I took a bite and suddenly thoughts of mother hit me hard. Mother alone in Pyongyang. Here I was, warm in this apartment. But what about her? At the time, I thought it was just a passing feeling. Looking back now, that was the beginning. A tiny, insignificant crack, but the first fracture that would eventually reshape my entire life. Fall 2021. Orders came from the foreign ministry. Second secretary at the Russian embassy. I stood there holding that paper, stunned. Overseas postings don't go to just anyone. Your party loyalty gets verified. Family background checked. People wait in line for years. I'd worked at the foreign ministry for 20 years. My turn had finally come. What shocked me more, the whole family could go. My wife Soon-hee, my son Sung-hyuk, my daughter Yoon-ju, all of us together. Usually you go alone or leave someone behind in Pyongyang as collateral. But all 4 of us? That meant the party trusted me. My chest swelled with pride. The morning we left, Mother came to Sunan Airport. She was over 70, up before dawn to make that long journey. When I held her hand, it felt so cold and rough hands, worn by farm work, housework, endless hardship. I said, "Mother, I'll be back soon. 3 years, that's all." She just nodded silently. I never imagined that would be the last time. As the plane climbed above the clouds, Soon-hee squeezed my hand. The kids stared out the window, eyes bright with excitement. Especially Yoon-ju. She was 22 and her eyes were shining. I thought it was just excitement. But later I realized that was longing for something else entirely. Landing at Moscow's Sheremetyevo airport, something felt off. People walking through the terminal looked different. Somehow lighter, more relaxed, like they were going wherever they wanted. On their own 2 feet. Smiling people, chattering people, someone holding flowers while waiting. These sights struck me as foreign. People in Pyongyang don't look that relaxed in public spaces. There's always tension somewhere, caution lurking. I couldn't explain why back then. We unpacked at the embassy housing that first night. Moscow's lights filled the window. From a distance, beautiful. Yet somehow my chest felt hollow. I thought of Mother. Beyond those lights, across to Pyongyang. What was she doing right now? I shook off the thought and went to bed. First night in a strange land, Moscow life began. Months passed. I adapted to embassy work while exploring the city when I could. As a diplomat, I had some freedom of movement. Never alone, of course. Always with a colleague, always reporting where we went. Still, I took that privilege for granted. I remember the first day at Red Square. Tourists poured in from everywhere. Russians, Europeans, Asians. Everyone chattering in their own languages. Taking photos, eating ice cream as they wandered. The scene felt so strange. We have a square in Pyongyang too, Kim Il-sung Square. But no one strolls around like that. You march in formation or move on command. Wander freely and you'll draw hostile stares. Work brought shocks too. One day during a meeting with Russian foreign ministry staff, they openly challenged their superiors. No shouting, just calm statements like, "I see that differently." My breath caught. Back home, that one sentence would have gotten you hauled away that evening. After the meeting, I returned to my quarters and stared at the ceiling. For a long time, why could these people speak so freely? The question surfaced before I quickly suppressed it. I knew better than to think that way for long. 20 years of training had conditioned me. My daughter Yunju's troubles started around then. She'd enrolled at Moscow State University and began mixing with Russian students. At first, I thought she just wanted to improve her language skills. Then one day, out of nowhere, she asked me, "Father, why do Russians search for whatever they want on their phones?" I cut her off. That's just how people are here. But Yunju just nodded and looked out the window. That profile made me uneasy. I didn't question the system. Not then. Or rather, I worked hard not to question it. But the cracks were already forming. Even when I turned away, the fissures in the wall kept growing on their own. Spring 2022. After dinner, I heard something from Yunju's room. When I opened the door, she was watching something on her laptop. She slammed it shut the moment I entered. That movement was too fast, too panicked. I knew instantly. What were you watching? Yunju couldn't answer. I slowly opened the laptop. A Korean YouTube video was playing. Everyday life somewhere in Seoul, people smiling brightly over a meal. Ordinary people eating ordinary food in an ordinary restaurant. I closed the laptop and looked straight at Yunju. "You know you can't watch this." "I know." "Then why?" Yunju stayed silent. Then she looked up, tears welling in her eyes. In a quiet voice, she asked, "Father, are we really the best off in the world?" My heart sank. I didn't know what to say. I understood where that question came from. Months in Moscow. What Yunju had seen and felt. Russian friends' lifestyles, the world online, people speaking and laughing freely. How did that look through a 22-year-old's eyes? That's all surface level. Capitalist societies have terrible wealth gaps. I kept talking, but my voice grew smaller. Yunju said through tears, "I just want to live honestly. Without being afraid. Without being afraid." Those words echoed in my ears for a long time. Listen, our children shouldn't have to live in fear. Parents want their kids to live comfortably, whether in Pyongyang or Moscow or anywhere else, right? That night, I told Sunhee about it. She stayed quiet for a while. Then she said softly, "I've been having strange thoughts too." It was the first time we'd had such a conversation. That exchange was both frightening and strangely relieving. After that night, we slowly began saying things to each other we'd never dared before. February 24th, 2022. Russia invaded Ukraine. Moscow stirred. Anti-war protests broke out. Foreign embassies moved urgently. I watched it all from inside our embassy. As a diplomat, I accessed more information than most, and that information turned my stomach. Internal foreign ministry reports mention North Korea supplying artillery shells to Russia, millions of rounds, flying toward Ukrainian people. I sat there after reading that document. My mind went blank. How do our people live back home? Rations cut off long ago. No heating in winter, crawling across market floors for a single pill in that country manufactures shells to feed someone else's war. That's when I first felt anger rising clearly. That burning sensation inside, hard to describe. Things got worse after that. Once the war started, surveillance inside the embassy tightened noticeably. We had to be more careful even talking among ourselves. Travel reports became stricter. About a month later, Secretary O from our embassy was suddenly recalled home. No reason given, just packed up and left overnight. Word came out days later that O had watched Russian local news alone in his embassy quarters. That was the problem. Russian news. News from his posting country. Even that was a crime. Hearing that, chills ran down my spine. You remember when South Korea had curfews, right? After midnight, you couldn't go outside. Looking back, that must have felt stifling, but at least the daytime was free. There, it's different. Day or night, even while sleeping, they monitor inside your head. Around that time, my son Sung-hyuk quietly came to me. His face was rigid. The embassy security team had given him a new assignment. I asked what it was. Sung-hyuk lowered his eyes and said, "They told me to report on our family's activities." My son had been ordered to spy on his father, his own father, mother, sister. I couldn't speak. I just gripped Sung-hyuk's shoulder hard once. Tears formed in Sung-hyuk's eyes. In that moment, I heard something inside me shatter completely. I'd carried a diplomatic passport for quite a while. From my first day at the foreign ministry, that passport symbolized my pride. Something ordinary people never see in their lifetime: the privilege of going abroad. Proof of that privilege contained in one small booklet. But as summer 2022 passed, looking at that passport started to feel strange. The moment I held it, something heavy pressed down. Not privilege shackles. As long as I had this, I could be recalled home anytime, controlled anytime, disappeared anytime. That passport was proof I belonged to the system. After Sung-hyuk's revelation, I had to watch every word inside the embassy. Sung-hyuk struggled after confiding in me. We'd deliberately walk in parks, whispering quietly when no one was around. Even then, in low voices, a father and son sneaking around parks to whisper thinking about it. Now it's absurd. One day while walking, Sung-hyuk said, "Father, I don't want to live like this." My 28-year-old son, I had no answer for him. No words a father could offer. Agreeing that we shouldn't live this way felt terrifying. Telling him to just endure felt even crueler. Around that time, soon he showed me something. Another embassy wife's secret. She held out her phone screen, a defector's testimony video. A North Korean defector doing well in South Korea being interviewed. I watched briefly, then turned off the screen. You can't watch this. But one thought flickered through my mind. How did that person make it there? That night, I took my passport from the drawer and studied it for a long time. The expressionless face in a neat suit in the passport photo. Was that me? What did that person think about while living? What dreams did he have? Unable to stay by mother's side, unable to tell my son to live like a human. Being all these years clinging to this one passport suddenly felt so empty. Putting the passport back in the drawer, I thought, if this is shackles, not privilege, maybe discarding it is the path to real freedom. The call came late one fall night in 2022, my older brother in Pyongyang. His voice was choked. I knew something was wrong the moment I picked up. My brother couldn't speak. Silence hung there. Then he said briefly, very briefly, "Mother passed away." I heard the words but didn't understand at first. My head registered them, but my heart refused to accept. Mother had passed. The woman who'd held my hand at Sunan Airport. Those cold, rough but warm hands gone from this world. The next morning, I asked the ambassador for immediate return. I needed to handle Mother's funeral arrangements. Say one last goodbye. The ambassador thought briefly, then said, "You're on assignment. I'll report to headquarters, but stay at your post until permission comes." Headquarters didn't grant return permission after 3 days. Not after a week. Only after Mother's funeral ended did the denial come through. No reason given. Just no. That night, I went into the embassy quarters bathroom and locked the door. I turned on the faucet and cried. Afraid the sound might leak out, I left the water running. Afraid my son might hear, my wife might hear, embassy staff might hear. I cried alone like that. You've heard stories about separated families, right? The elderly, who've spent their lifetimes thinking of parents and siblings left in the north. That pain I understood a little bit for the first time. Mother dying back home and I couldn't hold her hand. One last time, couldn't close her eyes. What profound regret. That night I felt my last connection to the system break. Loyalty to the party, duty to the supreme leader, 20 years of all that. This system that wouldn't even let me attend Mother's final. Moments, what loyalty did I owe it? After the tears stopped, what remained wasn't anger or grief. It was a cold, clear decision. I have to get out of here. After Mother's death notice, I didn't speak for a while. Just went through the motions: work, eat, sleep. But soon he knew. After over 20 years of marriage, you know without words. One day my wife took my hand and asked, "What are you thinking?" I didn't answer. Then she spoke first. "I'll go with you. Wherever." My eyes burned at those words. She'd been thinking the same thing. That day we first spoke the word aloud: defection. In small voices, trembling voices. The problem was the kids. We had to take Sung-hyuk and Yoonju, but they had to agree. If we got caught, the kids were finished too. Forced recall, punishment, political prison. Camps, we had to be ready for all of it. I couldn't force that decision on them. The next day, I called Sung-hyuk out to a park. Sitting on an empty bench, I looked around once, then said quietly, "I'm asking honestly, do you really want to leave here?" Sung-hyuk hesitated briefly, then nodded. He didn't speak, but those eyes answered. Eunju was different. Before I even brought it up, she said, "Father, I've been waiting a long time." This child had already prepared herself. At 22, I felt both proud and sorry. This young thing had carried that weight alone while watching my face. It took 3 days, 4 family members laying out our fears, persuading each other, comforting those who cried. When Soon-hee said, "What if we get caught?" I answered honestly, "If we get caught, it's over. But if we keep living like this, we're already finished." On the 4th evening, our family sat around the dinner table. We just looked at each other silently. Then Soon-hee reached out her hand first. I placed mine on top, then Sung-hyuk, then Eunju, one by one. Live together or die together. That's what I said. In that moment, those words felt like the warmest thing. 4 family members joined hands and made an irreversible decision. Outside the window, Moscow's first snow was falling. January 2023. Deep winter had come to Moscow. A night below -4 degrees Fahrenheit, I'll never forget it. Our family prepared meticulously beforehand. Before leaving embassy quarters, we packed only essentials into small bags. A few changes of clothes, some cash. And one thing that absolutely had to go: 4 diplomatic passports. I sat the family down and spread the 4 passports on the table. Those passports containing our 4 faces. Keeping them meant we'd be tracked forever. North Korean passports belonged to the North Korean state, not to us, so they had to be destroyed. I crouched before the stove and pushed the first passport into the flames. The stiff passport turned black and burned quickly. Second, third, fourth. As I fed each one to the fire, Soon-hee gripped my arm tightly. Eunju closed her eyes. Sung-hyuk bit his lip. All 4 burned down to ashes. I stared at those ashes and thought, now we're nothing. No identity, no country, nowhere to return. Did our ancestors who fought for independence feel this way when they turned their backs on home? Did the elderly feel this during the Korean War, packing refugee bundles and heading south? The burned ashes felt like freedom weighing exactly that much. We left embassy quarters at 2 a.m. Sung-hyuk knew the CCTV blind spots from his security work. Most useful thing my son ever did. The outside air hit our faces. Moscow's deep winter air is like a blade. Yet strangely, that air felt refreshing. Anatoly's car, a Russian contact I'd arranged beforehand, waited at the alley entrance. Anatoly was someone I'd known through embassy work. He didn't ask questions, just took our family to his apartment. Good people exist among Russians too. Quarry. 4 family members huddled together in Anatoly's small room. No one spoke. We just leaned on each other, afraid yet strangely at peace. We'd crossed a river with no return. No reason to look back. Morning broke at Anatoly's apartment. I woke up and reflexively went to the window, looking for embassy vehicles nearby. Nothing there. Just gray Moscow morning. Our embassy absence would have been discovered that morning. When attendance isn't confirmed, reports go up immediately. Pyongyang gets contacted, North Korean security agents in Moscow start moving. I could see that timeline in my head. 20 years at the foreign ministry taught me that. Anatoly gave us 1 room. 4 people in a small room, but we weren't in a position to complain. We were grateful. Anatoly's wife prepared simple meals, Russian bread and soup. Eunju cried while eating. Not from hunger, from the feeling of freedom, I imagine. The scariest part was going outside. We needed groceries, couldn't rely entirely on Anatoly. I went out each time. My Russian is fluent, 20 years as a diplomat plus Moscow training. I shopped speaking and acting like a Russian. Never knew this skill would be used this way. When I studied at the Foreign Language University, once at a supermarket I made eye contact with an Asian man who looked familiar. My heart dropped. What if he was from the embassy? I calmly looked away and walked slowly toward the checkout. My hands trembled. Turned out he was probably just a Chinese tourist. Nothing happened. Every Asian face on the street made my heart race. The kids struggled too. Sung-hyuk stayed inside most days, staring blankly out the window. Eunju searched for something constantly on her phone. Later I learned she was gathering defection information. That young thing was finding the path while her father faltered. Soon-hee rarely showed fear. When mealtime came, she'd make something from whatever we had, taking care of the kids. Such a comfort. Mother was like that too, smiling at the table even through hardship. Soon-hee was exactly the same. Watching her, I gritted my teeth. I have to keep this family alive. 3 weeks in hiding. We couldn't stay at Anatoly's forever. He had his own life, and we put him at risk. We moved every other day. Anatoly's friend's place, that friend's other acquaintance's place, wandering around Moscow's outskirts. In all that, Yunju found something. Searching the internet on her phone, she discovered a defector support network operating in Europe. There was a connection in Finland. Korean missionaries who could help. "Father, if we reach Finland, there's a South Korean embassy there." When Unju said that, her eyes shone. Hearing Finland, I pictured the map in my head, a country bordering Russia. Head northwest from St. Petersburg and you hit the Finnish border. We could take a train from Moscow to St. Petersburg. Not an impossible route. The problem was identification. We had no documents. We'd burned our passports. Moving within Russia required some form of ID. Anatoly solved this problem. He got old IDs from a friend. The photos were crudely altered but might pass a quick inspection. I held that ID for a long time thinking, if this gets caught, we're arrested immediately. But without it, we can't move an inch. No choice. I told the family honestly, it's dangerous, but we have to go. Sung Hyuk said, let's go first. Yunju and Soon-hee nodded. That night, we shouldered our 4 bags and prepared to move. Minimal luggage, you can't go if it's heavy. The night before leaving, I stood alone by the window, looking at Moscow's lights for a long time. 20 years I'd moved in and out of this city as a diplomat. Never imagined leaving like this, becoming nobody, disappearing without anyone knowing. Yet strangely, I didn't feel bitter. Being nobody felt more like freedom. My daughter came and stood beside me. "Father, are you scared?" she asked. I answered honestly. Scared, yeah, but also excited. Unju smiled silently. That smile the last I saw of Yunju in Moscow. March 2023, night train. Moscow's Leningrad station to St. Petersburg. Departing 11 p.m. Our 4 family members stood on the platform several paces apart. Can't look like a family too conspicuous. Before boarding, I took a deep breath at the ticket window. Buying seats, just get through this. I spoke to the clerk in Russian, natural tone from years of living there. The clerk issued tickets without suspicion. First checkpoint cleared. The train was dark and warm. We sat in separate seats, pretending to sleep. As the train left Moscow and entered darkness, I leaned my forehead against the window. Black Russian planes rushed past. Past midnight, a clattering sound came from the corridor's end. The conductor checking tickets. I sat there as if nothing was wrong. My heart pounded in my ears. The conductor entered our car. Checked tickets, checked IDs. A flashlight swept across my face. The conductor asked something in Russian. Travel purpose? I answered as prepared, visiting relatives in St. Petersburg, haven't seen them in a while. Casual, tired expression. The conductor nodded and moved to the next car. Soon he squeezed my hand hard. Her palm was sweaty. Mine too. Sung Hyuk from the car behind looked at me and nodded slightly. Signal that we'd passed. 6 a.m. Arrival at St. Petersburg station. Stepping outside, cold air hit us. This city is farther north than Moscow, colder. But we had to wait at this station for the missionary we'd contacted. Yunju had reached out beforehand to a Korean missionary in this city. After waiting about an hour in front of the station, a middle-aged Korean man approached. When our eyes met, he said quietly in Korean, "Mr. Park?" Hearing those words, I nearly cried. Korean. That warm, familiar Korean I hadn't heard in so long. The missionary's name was Pastor Choi. He had a Gyeongsang province accent from the moment we met. He felt like a father. He already knew our whole situation. Unju had briefed him thoroughly. Pastor Choi put us up for a night in a small apartment on the outskirts of St. Petersburg. He served us a warm meal doenjangjigi. Never expected to eat soybean paste stew there. Soon he took 1 spoonful, put down her spoon, and cried. Just cried without saying a word. My throat tightened too. 1 dish of food could touch people's hearts that deeply. I learned that again. The next morning before dawn, we got in Pastor Choi's car and started moving toward the Finnish border. Kept heading northwest. The forest grew denser. Russia's border zones are endless forest. White birch trees standing in forests with no one around. We stopped about 6 miles from the border. From here, we'd have to walk, Pastor Choi said. He'd figured out the patrol schedule. We weren't the first to use this route, he told us. That reassured me a bit. We started walking through the forest. Snow remained even in March. Feet sinking and emerging from snow. Soon he twisted her ankle. I supported her on one side while Sung Hyuk held his mother on the other. Yunju led ahead, scouting the path. That child had taken on that role somehow. How long did we walk? Our feet got wet, our bodies started freezing. I stopped once and looked at the sky. When leaving North Korea, I felt like Mother was watching from heaven. I said in my heart, "Mother, I'm going now. Protect us." You can laugh at me. At my age, praying to the sky. But it felt natural then. When humans can't handle everything, they lean on something invisible. After walking for some time, Sung-hyuk pointed ahead. Where the forest ended, a fence appeared. Beyond the fence, more forest, but those trees looked slightly different. Pastor Choi said quietly, "Beyond that is Finland." Hearing that, I couldn't move for a moment. Crossing the fence took less than 5 minutes. Sung-hyuk went first, then Soon-hee and I, Yunju, last. The moment my feet touched Finnish soil, I just crouched down right there. Not because my legs gave out, it just felt like what I should do. I grabbed a handful of snow-covered dirt. Cold. But that coldness felt like being alive. How long had we walked? Maybe an hour? Headlights appeared in the distance. Finnish border patrol vehicle. We didn't run. Instead, we raised our hands and walked toward them. A guard got out. Blond, tall man. He said something in Finnish. I don't know Finnish. I spoke in Russian. "We are North Korean diplomats. We want to go to South Korea." As I said those words, my legs trembled. This one sentence would decide everything. The guard looked at me briefly, then lifted his radio. Reporting something, it seemed. After a moment, he said in Russian, "Will you come with us?" Not a command. A question. "Will you come?" I don't know why those words sounded so warm. 4 family members climbed into the patrol car. Inside was warm. The heater was running. Soon-hee warmed her hands by the heater, crying silently. Sung-hyuk patted his mother's back. Yunju looked out the window, biting her lip. I couldn't speak, just took in that scene. We arrived at the border patrol station. We were shown to a small room. The officer brought warm bread and coffee. We couldn't communicate, but his actions spoke for him. I bit into the bread, couldn't tell you what it tasted like. Just tears came. Outside, Finnish morning was breaking. Pale light spreading over the forest. That light was so quiet and clean. Watching that light through the window, I thought, we made it. The whole family made it. "Mother, I got here." Finnish authorities processed us as humanitarian protection cases. We stayed in temporary housing for a few days, undergoing simple questioning. When they learned I was a former North Korean diplomat, Finnish authorities visibly tensed. I knew we were a special case. A few days later, we moved to the South Korean embassy in Helsinki. Standing in front of the embassy building, I felt something strange. The taguki was fluttering in the wind. For decades, I'd been taught that flag belonged to the enemy. Yet seeing that flag, I don't know why tears came. Land of people who speak the same language, a country of the same blood. How much division had stolen from us? That one taguki seemed to say it all. Stepping inside the embassy, a Korean staff member came out. Someone about my age. He said to me in Korean, "You've been through a lot." Just 4 syllables. But those 4 syllables broke me. 20 years as a diplomat. Never once breaking down, I cried in that embassy lobby. I wasn't ashamed. Those were deserved tears. 4 family members went through identity verification one by one. With my diplomatic background, there was a lot to verify. Matters related to state secrets, internal North Korean information, embassy work details. I told them everything I knew. Didn't hide anything. 20 years serving the system, this is what it came to. Embassy staff treated our family to dinner. Korean food. White rice with seaweed soup, kimchi, bulgogi. The kids took 1 spoonful at a time, saying nothing, just eating. Then Sung-hyuk, chewing bulgogi, said, "This is what real bulgogi tastes like." Wonju giggled. Soon-hee laughed. I laughed too. That laughter rang through that small Helsinki embassy dining room. One meal could bring this much happiness. You don't know unless you've gone hungry. That night, I looked out at Helsinki streets from the embassy quarters window. Quiet, clean streets. I placed my hand on my chest and thought, we can live a little more like human beings now. That one thought felt so overwhelming. May 2023, we landed at Incheon Airport. Walking the arrival corridor after getting off the plane, I saw South Korean soil through the window. Land with greenery. I just stopped once and looked at that land. Same people living there, why did it look so different? I tried not to cry, but tears came again. I cried a lot on this journey. After entry, we were immediately transferred to the National Intelligence Service. Former diplomat, different procedure from regular defectors. Nearly 2 months of in-depth interviews and identity verification. I didn't think it was hard. I saw it as this country-building trust in us. Someone who worked 20 years at the foreign ministry just arrived, of course, they need to verify. We entered Hanawan after that. Defector Settlement Education Center. At first I thought we'd study textbooks, but it was life adaptation training. How to ride buses, use supermarkets, open bank accounts. I'd been a diplomat, so I knew some of that. But formally learning to live as a South Korean person was different. I remember the first day at the supermarket. Soon-hee stood in front of the fruit section for a long time. Apples, pears, tangerines, grapes, mangoes, kiwis neatly stacked. She looked at them and asked, "We can buy all of this?" I said yes. Soon-hee picked up a tangerine and looked at it for a long time. Sung-hyuk got hooked on convenience stores. Stores lit up even at 2 a.m. He kept going out at night out of fascination. "Father, here everything really is open 24 hours. That's right, son. Here, no one stops you from going out at night. Yoonju prepared for university. She already had Russian skills from Moscow, and Korean, of course. She entered a Seoul university the following spring. On orientation day, watching Yoonju walk across campus in her own clothes, not a uniform, not a military-style outfit, I thought to myself, that child who wanted to live without fear is really living that way now. Even though North and South use the same language, some expressions felt unfamiliar at first. Kokuljem, debak, words like that. But you adapt quickly. You don't know how powerful it is to speak the same language, being the same people, laughing together at the dinner table. That already felt like half of reunification. Right now I'm sitting at a small desk in a one-room somewhere in Seoul. The Han River is visible outside my window, river waters sparkling in the evening light. Sometimes I look at this river and think, this water flows. North becomes the Taedong River, passes through my hometown, reaches the sea. Thinking that way I can feel home even from here. Today I'm writing a letter to Mother. There are words left unsaid. Mother, I'm doing well, living like a human being. When I wake up in the morning, I can buy and eat what I want, say what I want to say, go where I want to go. I didn't know such things could be this much happiness when I was by your side. Not being at your deathbed still weighs on my heart. It ended with one phone call saying return permission denied. I don't know where to put that guilt. But I think even as you passed alone that cold winter, you probably prayed for your son to live well. Because that's who you were, Mother. These days I work at a defector support organization. My diplomatic experience proves useful here too, helping new defectors settle, spreading awareness of North Korean realities to the international community. This work is rewarding. The feeling that what I went through wasn't in vain. I worry about my older brother left in Pyongyang. He must know our family defected, what disadvantages he's suffered. That thought keeps me up at night. My choice might have become his burden. I believe in reunification. No, it's beyond belief. If reunification doesn't happen, people like me keep appearing. People who must abandon family and flee, people who can't attend their mother's deathbed. Countries where sons get ordered to spy on their fathers, that such a place openly exists in this world. Your generation of elders lived through the Korean War. People who know that pain in their bones are still alive. How wonderful would it be if reunification happened while that generation still walks this earth? I live holding that hope. In our generation, it must happen. Mother, when reunification comes, I'll return home. I'll find your grave and bring flowers with my own hands. Flowers here in Korea are so beautiful. Spring azaleas bloom in the north too, right? I'll bring you an armful of those flowers. Until that day, I'll live well. Your son, Chulmin.